You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
I got Fantha.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file.
That doesn't sound too hard.
Boom! This is Making Tracks.
This is the way.
Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
I know these people. They are brutal. Does this look Jedi to you?
That's not how the Force works.
They'll never see it coming.
Count me in.
Lisa back.
You're listening to Making Tracks, and a very special episode as we were given the opportunity to sit down with a number of fellow fan sites to speak to director Jon Favreau and Lucasfilm president Dave Filoni to talk all about The Mandalorian and Grogu. We join our friends from Fathers and Galaxy, Fangirls Going Rogue, Sky Talkers, Talking Bay 94, Coffee with Kenobi, Jedi News, Triad of the Force and Geeky Waffle to get all of 21 seconds of questions and answers in our case, but it was all good fun. So listen to this roundtable featuring Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni ahead of the release worldwide of The Mandalorian and Grogu.
Hello, this is Keith and Kerwin of Fathers and Galaxy.
Hi.
Hi. Congratulations on the new movie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So our first question is for both of you. There were plans to develop season 4 of The Mandalorian. How did the change moving the series from the small screen to a theatrical release reshape the story you originally wanted to tell?
Well, we had planned on doing a fourth season, and the fourth season was going to be a continuation of the third season. I actually wrote all of it, and then there was a work stoppage. There was a strike, and after the strike lasted quite a long time, when we came out of it, there was a conversation about how long Star Wars had been out of theaters, and is there an opportunity to explore a story around these two characters. And these are two characters that even if people hadn't seen the show, they were familiar with already, especially Grogu. People knew him as Baby Yoda. But we couldn't take the scripts, unfortunately, that I wrote and just turn them into a movie, because a movie has to play as a 2-hour adventure. And because there hasn't been Star Wars in theaters for 7 years, we really wanted it to be accessible to people who this might be their first Star Wars experience. There might be a 12-year-old who was a little kid when the last time Star Wars was in movie theaters. We wanted the fans to be able to go and enjoy themselves, but also bring people who this might be their first experience with Star Wars.
Yeah.
So we had to start from scratch. We had to start writing, and so it changed dramatically. And we came up, Dave and I worked the story out before we ever set out to make the film, to make sure that Disney and Lucasfilm, that everybody was comfortable with the story we were going to tell. And when everybody signed off, we did some artwork with Doug Chang. We got a good sense of what it was, and then we embarked upon this basically 3-year journey.
Yeah.
Hello, this is Sarah Woloski from Fangirls Going Rogue and my emotional support Grogu, right here, Richard. And I was very excited by the score of this film. And so while working with composer Ludwig Göransson, what specific musical elements did you discuss to help distinguish this film from the TV series?
Oh, interesting. So Ludwig actually came to me. First of all, he was like, he threw his hat in the ring. I didn't know, we'd worked together for a long time. This guy's won a lot of trophies since we started together, and he really did a lot of exploring and helped us define the themes of The Mandalorian and gave us some iconic musical phrases that people recognize, and that's very difficult to do when you're following behind John Williams, who made some of the most iconic themes in cinema history. So the fact that Ludwig even was able to come in for the show and create those themes was a big deal. And the fact that he said, look, we're doing a movie, and I showed him, Ludwig's the type of composer that you bring him in at the beginning and you keep showing him throughout. And he keeps writing things and changing things. But he saw the scope and the scale of it. This is a different aspect ratio. It's in the IMAX format, big set pieces, big sets, big character moments. He felt that the score should reflect that. And so he went much more orchestral. He also developed new themes around new characters. But what I love about it is that 2 hours from end to end, the thing feels like a playlist. It feels like like he's throwing a party. And you get moving in your seat. So you have the set piece with all these great visuals that ILM and all the other vendors are creating. you have these great performances by the stunt performers, and you throw that music on top of it, and it makes you feel a certain way that I don't think you got to feel that way watching at home. And I look so forward to seeing it tonight with an audience. That's the one thing we felt, that I didn't mind the restrictions of doing a streaming show. I really enjoyed working on it. But when we would have a premiere, we would all look at each other and say, I wish we could feel this way every week or more, And so now in the movie theater, it's going to feel a lot more connected to what Star Wars was when I was 10 years old. And Ludwig's music fully embraces that this is a communal experience as a live music concert or a sporting event might be. And I think that's why people come to the movies. They want to come for a shared experience. Your TVs are so nice at home. Streaming is so well done. The content on it, I love streaming shows. I love watching my television at home. But to go to the movie and feel that feeling, you don't get that anywhere else. And we wanted to make sure that we lived up to that.
Hey man, it's me, Kevin Smith, Star Wars fan, Fantha Tracks fan.
Hi, we're Caitlin and Charlotte from Sky Talkers. It's so great to talk with both of you today. This film is a culmination of almost a decade of partnership in this medium. And since, John, you were one of the first people to see the Clone Wars, it feels so right that Rada the Hutt is a central part of this film.
Thank you for
How did that come to be?
So I was at Skywalker Ranch, which just the notion of being at Skywalker Ranch mixing Iron Man 1, this beautiful creative retreat that George Lucas created in Marin in the hills, was a dream come true. And Dave was there living embedded in the carriage house, or actually in Big Rock.
Big Rock, yeah.
And he was coming up with this Clone Wars series that, nobody had ever heard of, that George was doing with them, and, on the other side of the
Secret
of the property.
Hills.
My son was there as a little guy, and he came by. I showed him what we were working on. I met Dave up there, and he said, "Oh, you want to show your son the Clone Wars work in progress?" And my kid was the first kid to see any of it. It was super cool. Now you look back at it compared to like Maul.
No,
it looks like it was prehistoric technology, but at the time it was so cutting edge. And the stories were great, the characters were great, the energy was great. And I said, hey, if you ever want a voice, and then not too long after that, I was called up to do Pre Vizsla, playing a Mandalorian with the Darksaber, and maybe all of it.
And you never stopped. You kept playing a Mandalorian.
Still bubbling under there. And then years later, when I pitched to Kathy Kennedy, she says, "Oh, you should meet this guy, Dave Filoni." I said, "Oh, I know Dave Filoni."
Yeah.
And that partnership is why we've been doing it almost a decade. To stick with something this long, it has to be fulfilling. And this creative relationship is such a well balanced one. Dave really knows how to oversee the creative process now that especially he's running the show. I really look forward to this next era, and I love having my ideas both encouraged and also guided in a way that only another creative could do.
Well, when I saw Iron Man, I just thought, wow, John, he understands Star Wars, because it had adventure, it had heart,
it had wipes.
Action,
it had Star Wars wipes.
It just had the right feeling, and it turned out to be true. It's been really fun for me, because I'd wanted to, after George had really taught me, working on Clone Wars, I was so interested in live action. And so when Kathy came on, and I said I'd really be interested in exploring that, but I'd never gone to school for that. It was always animation and drawing. But she found opportunities to get me exposed. And then, collaborating with John really was the kind of missing piece that I really needed to understand this other medium that Star Wars' original expression was. But because of the way George had taught me, everything was really clicking pretty readily in the way that we made that show. And John's always, John's a great surprise for creatively. He's so imaginative. Never did I imagine that Rada would come up as a subject again, but John was like, "Hey, what about Rada?" And I was like, "What about him?" And you're like, "I have this idea," but it's one of the things I learned about just storytelling is you just have to be open to things, and like a child of Yoda's species, like what even is that? But I think it's not just about the idea; it's about having the right people creatively behind those ideas, driving those stories forward. And, I think one of my jobs has been that since I've been at Lucasfilm so long and work with George, I just kind of have become sensitive to, well, maybe this, maybe not that, think about this. But it's not about telling people what to do. It's just saying, hey, think about this. And Jon comes up with great answers, or it takes him in a different direction. Like, one of the things was that Mandalorians and Clone Wars took their helmets off all the time, but Jon was like, what if that wasn't? What if they didn't do that? And I said, well, yeah, let's talk about that. And it became a great story point in that series. And it's just exciting for me that the collaboration has lasted this long. We've gone on so many adventures, and now here's one of the biggest adventures of all, to the movie theater, which is very fun for me, and I'm just thrilled to be doing it with Jon, and seeing little Grogu up there in lights is this particular thrill. So yeah, it's exciting.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
Brandon Winerdy from Talking Bay 94. How are y'all? There are not a lot of human faces in this movie, which I love. But Jon, as a director, and Dave as a second unit director over the puppets, how hard is it to draw like significant emotion or those storytelling beats from masks, from aliens, from puppets, from animatronics? Because it really worked for me in the film, and it's always worked for me in Star Wars. But how is that as a creative?
Well, I think the answer is in the question. It's always worked in Star Wars, right? So when I think about Darth Vader, to me, is a character. And part of why we came up with the Mandalorians don't take their helmet off thing was, I think, me trying to connect narratively with the idea that Boba Fett was a face, was a character, and that if we were going to set out to do this, and I had been wrestling with the similar questions around, Iron Man. And, we had other, and speaking to people who've been working in Marvel for a long time, where some characters are whipping their mask off at every opportunity so you can connect with them. Star Wars never felt that way. Certainly the Episode 4, R2-D2 was the character I connected the most with, and he barely looks anthropomorphic. So I think it's how George contextualized these characters, but the whole idea of color, palette, and silhouette to help define the story. And I think that's why, younger people connect with Star Wars, even if they don't understand everything that's going on. It's sometimes it's a little scary for them, but there's a sense of who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, and a sense of hope ultimately, which I think is also helpful. And I think that the mask theater side of it contributes to how archetypal these characters feel. And knowing George's reverence for Joseph Campbell and the monomyth, I think all of these are tools that he arrived at. And even studying how it came together was really an intuitive process that emerged. And then Star Wars was defined around that first film, but his instincts led him to that. So I do like the idea of characters not always being a face, and certainly we had with Legacy, the animatronics, to have a character, an Ugnaught character, which would not be, I don't think you'd identify as one of the most expressive or empathetic characters in the canon, but that character ended up being a character that people connected with a lot because of Misty, her performance within the suit, of course our voice performance, and our puppet Nick Nolte, and our puppeteers and puppet designers. That you get away with different things in Star Wars than you do with other genres. You can have puppets mixed with CGI, mixed with miniatures, mixed with masks, and it's forgiven, and its wonkiness is almost embraced as part of the wabi-sabi of it all. And that's why I love working with not just masks and puppets, but stop motion, motion control miniatures. That's part of what that also allows us to tell a fresh story for a fresh audience. Story-wise, it's very accessible. But if you know Star Wars and you know your history, you're going to see that we're using ingredients. You know what I mean? We're going back to the seed bank and sprouting new.
The question's funny to me because coming from animation, I was so interested to work and direct actors right there in front of me, and the face and the performance, and like,
this is a test.
Test day. I won't have. This is different. This is the first day. I won't have the control I do in animation, where you can really micro any smile or eyebrow or anything. So I get there for the first day. We're shooting, and it was Mando in his helmet on a buck. So Mando on a thing that's not really there that he's riding, with Misty as Queel in a mask. So I see her eyes, but everything else, and I've got the puppeteers, and I'm like, right. So this is live action. It's just, but it was so much like animation in a way, because I was still directing the puppeteers like you direct your animators. And Brendan is such a cowboy. We talked about like Mando's eye, like his slit on his visor of his helmet being the brim of a hat, and how that would work that angle for like different expressions, and that became like a brow. So it was an interesting kind of step over for me into the world of live action. In fact, the first human face that I ever looked through a camera to see and direct was actually Werner Herzog, which that was another level of like, okay, strange. But, and obviously...
When you thought you were making live-action Star Wars, you weren't picturing looking at Werner Herzog.
Not necessarily, no, but he was brilliant. So it's like Star Wars is just a surprise that way, and it's a...
And I love how your story's getting around about how Werner Herzog's the reason that we're using the puppet Baby Yoda and not CGI.
He loved the puppet. He believed in it before I think any of us really did. Like, he fully committed to it. Because we had a lot of questions.
Shamed us for not embracing it.
Yeah, we should have embraced it more. But I don't know. I mean, Grogu's a little magic guy. The puppeteering of him, the way that the Legacy built it, they understood the way that it, he could move, and I've always enjoyed photographing it. And we figured out backlighting him, and you just figure out things. So when it came to doing the film, I was very excited to get to do the puppet unit.
We had tested all of it out a lot too, of how to get expression out of his face. There's also different performers in the costume sometimes, and each one brings a slightly different thing. And sometimes it's even purely digital, The Mandalorian. So it's a formula that we understand, and it's very Star Wars.
I was going to say it's very Star Wars. Star Wars is unlike anything else you can try to do. I've heard that from people. Kathy says it. George says it. Like, I think everybody that comes in contact with it doesn't understand that coming in, but they sure understand that going out.
Well, you look at behind the scenes of like when Boba Fett pops his mask off, and it's different people, and you have the puppet, the Frank Oz lowering, arm getting tired between takes, and Yoda.
Well, having done any of this, I have to say too, it gives you tremendous appreciation for the original team that did Star Wars. They were doing this stuff with not nearly sophisticated technology, computer chips, animatronics.
And we know the formula is going to work. And people are going to like Star Wars if we do this right.
But boy, is it amazing.
They didn't know. Nobody on the set would acknowledge that they were on
wood's banging around, the armor's clacking around, the astromechs are breaking, it's overheating.
What guts he had to make this.
Unbelievable. I so appreciate it.
We're following a trail up the mountain.
Yeah,
he was there with
Yeah, he's on. Trust me, it's gonna work. He's like Han Solo and the Falcon. It's not my fault, It's like it's all that kind of fun realm.
And the fact that he's still around and still cares is really awesome. And by the way, his museum is
amazing.
Awesome. Museum of Narrative Art.
Yeah, you're gonna
be
love
opening this year. Let's plug that.
Yeah,
great. It's not just Star Wars. It's his collection over 50 years of everything, and how he contextualizes it all. And I know, sorry, that gave through a lot of questions.
Yeah.
But Star Wars was a door. He opened a door to me to appreciating cinema, appreciating the monomyth, appreciating other filmmakers. As a 10-year-old, seeing that one experience was enough to get me curious about everything. And I am doing this. I wouldn't be doing this if I hadn't had that experience.
That's right.
Hello, gentlemen. Dan Zayer, Coffee with Kenobi. It's pretty clear, from everything we've seen, and of course, right now, that you two don't get along at all. So hopefully, you can figure out a way to bridge that gap. So it's the great thing about my day job. I'm a high school English teacher, and every Friday we do Mando Fridays.
Oh wow!
And
thank you for doing that gig. My dad's a teacher. My mom was a teacher. We appreciate you and what you're doing, and regardless of the Star Wars of it all, I'm happy to hear somebody like you who's passionate. So you sound like you care about it. It's a big, big deal.
I think it's the greatest. I appreciate that. Well, it's great because I incorporate different kinds of myths from all over the world, different cultures.
It's great.
And that then we capitalize on that every Friday with the Mandalorian, and even the most indifferent or apathetic to my students. Once we get to this, it becomes something they're so hungry for. They love these characters and the story and this myth. So how do you see the magic of that and the wonder of that translated into the big screen?
Well, the trick that George leaned into was he's reading from the old book. He was coming up with ideas and stories. He was inspired by Flash Gordon, among other things. But if the stories are true, it was when he really just created this overlay of archetypes in the monomyth and understanding the mythic structure of storytelling, and he applied that to the script and applied that ultimately to the edit, that it sang. It came together, because when you plug into that, you're plugging into a tradition, you're plugging into something that's baked into humanity's firmware for thousands of years, and he understood, because of his study of Joseph Campbell and discussions with Joseph Campbell and everyone Joseph Campbell was aggregating, all the storytelling traditions. When you do that, you start to surf a wave that was there long before you, and you're a link in a chain, as his museum points out, by the way, that this is an intergenerational tradition. The big screen offers us an opportunity to explore other aspects of what inspired George. Part of what got us through the smaller scope of the storytelling from streaming was we embraced not just what George did, but what influenced George, and so we leaned into the samurai film, into the Western. But arguably the largest influence on Star Wars was Flash Gordon and the serialized cliffhangers, the matinee cliffhangers that he grew up with. And even to the point that, Episode 4 was Episode 4, even when that was a standalone. Because he felt that, when he was a kid, he'd jump into the middle of a story and have to enjoy it and not understand the entire context, which I thought was kind of clever. Of course, now it's a fully fleshed out story, but at the time he didn't know that would be the case. What could we do? How could we make it look like Flash Gordon, and not the Flash Gordon that existed, but the Flash Gordon in the imaginations of the baby boomers who watched it and then made these A-plus versions of these cliffhangers, like Indiana Jones and Star Wars. And so you have the Lucas Spielberg generation that brought this level of technical innovation to it, with the Stan Winstons and the Rob Bottin's, that whole generation of creature makers and stop motion, the Tippets of the world, and of course later even ILM and the miniatures and the motion control miniatures and CGI. We could embrace something much bigger and more ambitious for the big screen. It's IMAX. We can build sets. We don't have to rely on a flexible stage like the Volume to turn the project around less than a year. It was a very helpful tool. We still used it, but in a much different capacity. And now we're using it to create reflections, interactive light, building it, adding it to existing sets. But you can't do the same magic trick over and over again. But what you can do is bring to life different set pieces that we never would have imagined that we could. So the giant CG creatures, Rada in CG, Zeb, Dragon Snake, the pit, showing the planet of Nalhutta, showing what all of that looks like. That opened up. We had a whole other section of the toy department available to us that we never had in the TV show.
Hi, this is Gareth Edwards, director of the best standalone Star Wars film since Caravan of Courage, called Rogue One. You're listening to Fantha Tracks. Enjoy.
Can we do a speed round? Let's do a speed round. Let's do a speed round.
We'll do short. We'll do our best.
We'll be quick.
Hi guys, James Burns here from Jedi News. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I just wanted to ask, obviously, John, this is you brought multiple films to the big screen. For Dave, this is his first foray into the big screen. So Dave, just talk us through that.
It's just really exciting. I mean, my only taste of it was when we put Clone Wars in theaters, so that's a very different ride. This was just, like John said, having him there, someone's been through it. Kathy also, producing. There was so much experience around me. It is just bigger in scale and scope, and we didn't have to limit things like we would do in the series, and I think that was really enjoyable, and to have the time to really work them out and get things right. But I've been well trained by George to be prepared for this moment. It's just finally here, so it's exciting. And today is exciting for me in a big premiere like this, to be at the center of it with Jon, who's been, at the helm. And it's been fun to watch him as the director, because I've been under the gun as the episodic director most of the time. So it's a bit of a switcheroo there, which is also fun for me. But yeah, fun.
Okay, we got to do quicker answers.
Yeah, sorry.
We're going to get through them. Yeah.
Hi guys, Mark from Fantha Tracks. Good to see you all. The huts, you get to explore the history and the more detailing to the huts. How much fun was that to sort of add to this classic creature?
Tremendous fun to look at references from the real world, to see what their physics might be like. Also look at how Nal Hutta existed in other media, and then applying it to live action was amazing. Next question.
There you go.
Hi, Dave. Hi, Jon. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us. My question was involving everything that you guys have been mentioning about the Lucas Museum of Narrative Arts and influences in Star Wars. So back in 2019, when Mando was coming out, everyone was mentioning about movies like westerns from like Sergio Leone's Man with No Name or Kurosawa's Yojimbo as influences for The Mandalorian. But I was wondering if there were any new films or additional films that served as influences for Mando and Grogu.
Some of the new ones are, again, Flash Gordon, both the remake, but more specifically the Buster Crabbe 1920s, was it 20s? 1920s?
I think we were talking about like Jason the Argonauts.
Oh, Jason the Argonauts, Harryhausen.
Like Harryhausen,
all that, yeah. Next.
Hi, Candace.
Hi, I'm Candace from the Geeky Waffle, also Space Waffles. This is the fourth time we'll see Din Djarin without his helmet. How do you choose which moments to show his face?
Oh, good question.
Yeah,
it's a hard one. This one, we're now contending with lore that we've created and making sure that we're not repeating ourselves.
It's got to be for the right emotional moment, though. I think that's the pivotal thing. That's kind of what drives us towards when do we take the helmet off. And then how do you get it off is also a very big question at this point,
That's right.
But yeah, it's usually for the emotion, because you want to see Pedro unleash all of his gifts and talents as an actor.
You get a whole other range of gears in the race car once you get to see that face.
Email radio@fanthatracks.com. Head to links.fanthatracks.com for links to our social media feeds, Fantha Tracks TV and Fantha Tracks Radio. Thanks to James Semple for the Fantha Tracks intro, Blues Harvest for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. New episodes drop Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 o'clock UK time. Our weekly news show, Good Morning Tatooine, goes live Sundays at 9 o'clock UK time on Facebook and YouTube. And remember, Fantha Tracks is absolutely free, so it costs nothing to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's Making Tracks Reaction Chat.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you all. Thank you, everybody.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.